There is not one way the fearful avoidant attachment style develops. There are multiple ways. And I see a lot of confusion about this, about how you could have the fearful avoidant attachment style because you don't really recognize the one way that you've came across. So let's dive into that today. I am Pauline, and I am so happy you are here, because when I came across attachment styles as a whole, I was convinced that had been up to that point convinced that I was securely attached. I had a really good relationship with my parents, and they were stable. There was no alcoholism, no chaos, no abuse. They were still together, and I just never ever thought that I could be, that I could have an insecure attachment. And um, I also was struggling a lot. This was in my early 20s, and I was in what I now know the crash state of the fearful avoidant attachment style. I was struggling with relationship OCD and other subtypes of OCD, with anxiety and depression, but I thought that was me. I thought I was doing it wrong. I should just try harder, be better. I was broken. There was something wrong with the chemistry in my brain or in my body. I never ever thought it was my childhood. And when I came across this, um, the general consensus seemed to be that you could only develop the fearful avoidant attachment style when you had adverse childhood experiences, or the ACEs, which was used a lot in psychology, to kind of measure almost how hard your childhood was, in very simple terms. So the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, are abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, neglect, physical or emotional, household dysfunction. So a parent that has a mental illness, mother treated violently, a relative that was incarcerated, alcoholism, divorce, like a really, really rough divorce, substance abuse, just things, pretty severe things that would completely dysregulate a household. And none of that was applicable to my situation, as I thought in that moment, because my parents were still together. There was no alcoholism. There were no clear signs. And so I was so confused as to why I did recognize many of the symptoms or the marks of the fearful avoidant attachment style. And by that time, I had already healed quite a lot. So I was very aware of my own patterns, and I had already started helping others that had intense doubts in their relationships, or relationship OCD. And I saw the patterns in them too, the same thoughts, the same um, behavior patterns and mechanisms, the protection mechanisms. Uh, and I was just very intrigued as to why those fearful avoidant patterns would show up, even though the ACEs weren't very applicable. Because the theory was that the more boxes you could check almost with the ACEs, if you have 10 out of 10, you had um, an abusive childhood, or a difficult childhood, and then it would make sense, that you had the fearful avoidant attachment style. But what then, with all these um, people that didn't have that, or were very low on the ACEs, and still developed the fearful avoidant attachment style? And so I dug further and really observed more. And I realized that there were actually multiple ways of the fearful avoidant attachment style developing, of which the ACEs was one. But it is also very much possible to develop it through a certain type of parenting, which can be very well intended by well-meaning parents, but can definitely develop into the fearful avoidant attachment style. And it could be so much more subtle than these very obvious obvious cases. And so the second way that I realized was an emotionally volatile and unpredictable environment. And that somewhat comes back in the ACEs, but I just wasn't really aware of what that looked like. And I thought that meant, screaming matches and um, just very obvious emotional volatility. But also this could be more subtle. If you have a parent who has a very hard time regulating themselves and therefore is dysregulated a lot of the times and gets angry out of nowhere, so there's just a lot of volatility in emotions, that creates a very unpredictable environment for a child. And your parent being your caregiver, even if they have a stable income, for instance, and they have a stable home and they take care of you in so many different ways, and you are safe in a physical sense in a way, it is very scary for a small child if your parent can get angry out of nowhere and you can't really predict it, because an angry parent is not just the anger itself, but it also means, am I still safe? Am I still going to be taken care of? And when I started digging so much deeper, I realized that this was definitely the case in my household. And I remember um, almost consciously thinking, is this going to be the moment my dad is fed up with me? Um, and I've just done everything wrong, and he's not going to want to take care of me anymore. And that's, you don't, I don't think that a parent would ever think that your child would come to that conclusion just by you being angry. Um, but a child definitely can, because you're completely dependent on your parents. So it makes sense, right? But then also, what can happen in an emotionally volatile and unpredictable environment is that your emotions get shamed. So for the fearful avoidant attachment style, what is at the core, one of the things that is at the core of it is um, a focus on feelings and emotions and almost putting them on a pedestal, but also in a negative way. So it could very well be that you were shamed for your emotions and feelings when you were younger. Um, because your parent had such a hard time processing their feelings and emotions in a healthy way, they also couldn't really handle your emotions and feelings. And so you were shamed for that and maybe guilt tripped for that. And that makes you scared of feeling your own feelings, because when anger comes up or when sadness comes up, when you got mocked or humiliated or shamed for that, just feeling those feelings is a sense of threat, creates a sense of threat, right? Um, and so that also brings a sense of unpredictability, because you never know when a feeling will come up. And securely attached people are feel safe feeling their feelings. It might not be comfortable. Nobody really wants to, feel intense sadness or shame or guilt, but there's no sense of immediate threat or shame attached to feeling your feelings, which makes it a less scary thing to happen. And so you have the unpredictability of not knowing when somebody else gets angry, the unpredictability of not knowing when that parent will not be taking care of you anymore, but also the unpredictability of your own emotions and feelings coming up and you not being able to process them, and it feeling so much heavier and more intense because um, you're used to there being a lot of negative associations around that. And you also put feelings on a positive pedestal because you were supposed to feel happy in order to kind of regulate your parent. All of this is just it creates unpredictability and makes it logical that you can't really find that safe space in yourself, even when you're out of the house and you're not living with your parents anymore. So just the fact that your parents or parent was emotionally volatile, unpredictable, um, and there was an unpredictable environment in some way when you were younger. It could also be a sibling, an older sibling, that was just very angry, and your parents didn't really have the capability to handle that. Then that becomes the unpredictable environment. So it could even be that your parents were just very loving and caring and very consistent in that towards you, but that you had an older sibling that was uh, that had a lot of emotions they couldn't handle, and your parents also didn't really have the capacity to do that. So that is the second way that the fearful avoidant attachment style can develop. And the third way, this is a question I get a lot. Is it always childhood trauma, or can it also develop in later relationships? And the answer is not very black and white. Most of the fearful avoidant attachment style usually develops in childhood. That's where your attachment style develops. So it is unlikely that you had a completely secure attachment in childhood and then you have a relationship later in life that fully creates the fearful avoidant attachment style. It can happen. It's not that it never happens. It's just unlikely, because when I started looking into this and I wasn't really ready to face the fact that my parents actually created or were the cause of my fearful avoidant attachment style, I thought it was the bullying. I was bullied pretty severely between the ages of 10 to 12. And I just thought that that was it. That was the reason that I had all these problems. But what I started seeing after was that the way my parents parented me actually gave way to me being bullied. And I'm not saying it's their fault. I never really blamed them for anything. I could see that they were a product of their upbringing, and they really did the best they could. Um, but they just had certain beliefs about parenting and how to parent that created the the inner environment in me to uh, kind of allow the bullying to happen, because I kept going back to those girls that bullied me and felt like I had to prove myself and had to perform, and then they would like me. So I thought it was the bullying, but when I dug deeper, I could see that the roots were planted before that in my childhood, even though it was more subtle than I thought. And then a relationship can definitely alter your attachment style, especially when it comes to narcissistic relationships. Because as much as I think that your childhood can kind of give way to being bullied or not, that is also not black and white, by the way. You can have had an amazing, amazing childhood, secure attachment, and still get bullied. But when it comes to narcissistic relationships, there's definitely not a clear link between you not having the best childhood and then being more vulnerable for narcissistic relationships. So a narcissistic relationship or a very unhealthy toxic relationship can definitely alter your fearful or your attachment style into fearful avoidant. Um, but the foundation usually is laid in childhood. So that is a way that the fearful avoidant attachment style gets developed. And then the last way, the fourth way, is one that I haven't come across yet. Also in others that talk about the attachment styles a lot, but is a very very clear one. And that is highly critical and judgmental parents. Um, and this is, I think, the one that gets missed so easily, where you could have a really good relationship with your parents and you can see that they really do their best and they try to help you. Because I wasn't really aware that what my father mostly was very critical and judgmental. I thought he was trying to help me, parent me, to make me ready for the world, but really he was um, very critical of pretty much everything I did, from the way I spoke to the way I dressed to the way I breathed sometimes. um, and when a parent can be that critical and judgmental, you always feel like you're not enough, you're not doing enough, but it can also always be a threat, especially when it's paired with that emotional volatility, which happens a lot. Then the parent that is the source of love and comfort and safety also becomes the source of threat. So threat can exist in different ways. It's not just physical abuse or sexual abuse. It can be different ways. And a very critical or judgmental parent can also uh, definitely feel like a threat. I always felt like I had to walk on eggshells and do everything perfectly, use the perfect words and the perfect amount of words and sentences in the perfect tone, and then my dad would take me seriously. And that is also a sense or a type of threat. So that is, I think, one of the more, maybe even most subtle ways the fearful avoidant attachment style can develop. It's definitely not just severe abuse. I think that misunderstanding is still going around. And also, with that last point, using guilt and shame as a parenting tactic, that really also has an influence on developing the fearful avoidant attachment style, which is very much driven by shame and guilt. And I truly believe that a lot of parents aren't even aware that they do this, that they use shame and guilt. They just don't know any other way, and they want their child to just be ready for the world, to fit into society, and so they feel like they need to make the child feel bad about themselves in order for them to change. And to get there, they use shame and guilt. But using shame and guilt a lot as a almost conscious tactic in parenting is very much linked um, to addictive behaviors, to behavioral problems later on, mental health issues. Uh, so it's not the best tactic. If you happen to be a parent watching this and you think, oh, maybe I use that sometimes, that's okay. Every parent does. But when you kind of really use it as a tactic, pretty much daily, um, that can be damaging. Yeah. So there are different ways the fearful avoidant attachment style develops, and the different ways need different ways of healing. I mean, when you score high on the ACEs, you will need more intense therapy probably, and it's really good to have a therapist that is thoroughly trauma informed and is has experience with working with severe abuse or severe childhood experiences. But when it comes to emotional volatility and the highly critical and judgmental parent, what you need more is a tool that will help you release emotional charge and that will help you process the stored trauma from your body. That is much more the area of complex PTSD. Um, so that means that there were small things every day that led to a a complex um, uh, framework almost in you that was trauma based. And what I used was the emotional freedom technique. I have a lot of videos on this channel about that, and also why it is so perfect for healing the fearful avoidant attachment style. Um, but it needs a kind of a different approach than just the ACEs, because it's more subtle and there's more emotional flashbacks where you're not really sure where it comes from, and it's a lot more understanding where the attachment style comes from, because as hard and horrible severe abuse is, sometimes it's more clear where it comes from, and when it's less clear, there's more just insight and knowledge about this specific attachment style that is needed to understand where it comes from. Because if you don't know that, you won't really allow yourself to heal, because you think it might be me, and so you hold on to those protection mechanisms because there's not really a good alternative yet. And when you start realizing that it's not you, and it is um, just the way that you were parented, and that had nothing to do with you, it was just bad luck that your parents didn't have the skills to give you a secure childhood and attachment, then that becomes separate from you, and then you can heal it, and you see it's not you, it's not your identity, it's not your character. So it's very important to know where it comes from, and it's also important to not just focus on the insights and the analysis and the patterns and understanding it, because I know you're very good at that, your brain is very good at that, but releasing the emotional charge from your body is what is going to make the biggest difference, and that is with tools like EFT. All right, let me know in the comments whether this was valuable for you, and I will see you in the next one. And if you really want to get to the roots, by the way, I have an online program, Healed and Happy, which explains just pretty much everything about where this comes from, but also immediately heals it. So don't feel like you have to. There are so many good therapists, amazing therapists, but I just want you to know that it's there. I make these videos really just to give you as much value as possible. And Healed and Happy is here if you want it, if you need it to heal. I am so happy you are here, and I will see you in the next one.